Hello and welcome to the MBA Cohort videocast. My name is Alex Miller, and today I'm with marketing guru Kevin McEvoy discussing the latest trends in the consumer packaged goods industry. Dr. McEvoy is an international expert on marketing and sales with decades of experience tracking new trends and anticipating demand, which is why we are so honored to have him on the show today. And we ask that you please like, comment, subscribe, and check out our new website, thembacohort.com. Thank you and enjoy.
It's a pleasure to be with you. I wish we could do this in person, but given the environment, we're doing it virtually. But it's a pleasure to be with you virtually and in person.
So, Professor, I have to ask you, how are you doing? Are you adjusting to the new normal? And are you picking up any hobbies?
Well, adjusting to the new normal is an interesting concept because I'm of an age now where I've come to the conclusion that there really is no such thing as normal. That normal is something that's changing all the time, and it means that we're constantly adjusting to a new paradigm. When the economy changes, normal changes. When the political landscape changes, normal changes. So in terms of there being a consistent normal, I think that this is a more dramatic change than we're accustomed to seeing. I think it's caught us a little off guard and we're a little bit surprised by it. And I think for me, the surprise is the amount of change that we're going through, not that there is change that we're going through. So the new normal, every day is a change. To me, that's what's normal.
So for the first topic today, I wanted to talk about the so-called consumer staples. So before we dive in, can we define what consumer staples are?
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about that. Let me kind of give a 2-second background. The industry that most people most associate with consumer products is called consumer packaged goods, or CPG. We call it CPG. And those are the products that you typically find in supermarkets and stores like Costco and Target. And they're products that are normally geared for home use. And it could be consumables and non-consumables. So it's food, beverages, cleaning materials, paper goods, and anything that you'd find if you went to your favorite supermarket or another place where you buy those things.
They're essential, right? They're the staples that are essential to our daily lives. There have been, bottom line, there have been modifications, but apart from that, business as usual. There's still the need and the demand. These are not the industries that are, shut down, right?
No, and the thing to keep in mind about that is how complex the process is. Most consumers will go into a store and have no concept of how those products got there and why they're there and why the ones that are there, and why they're where they are. And there's an entire process and science behind all of that. To go in and buy something at a supermarket means it came out of a production facility that needed packaging and raw ingredients and materials brought in. So there's opportunities there for contamination. And then it's got to be processed and packaged and shipped out. In that shipping process, there's the potential for contamination. Now, maybe not contamination of the product itself, but certainly contamination of the packaging. Manufacturers, distributors, and retailers don't drive the bus. The consumer drives the bus. There would be plenty of toilet paper if people didn't hoard it. So as soon as there's the news of, oh my God, there might be a shortage, what does the consumer do? They go and they buy 50 of them. Well, the distribution process, the warehousing process, manufacturing process was not built on the expectation of that kind of a demand curve. It's almost like a tsunami. So all of a sudden, all the product is quickly sucked out of the system.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you for addressing the consumer behavior side of the equation. I wanted to switch gear a little bit and talk about innovation. I know that these two industries that we're talking about are big on innovation. They depend on innovation. In normal times, innovation is the way to stay competitive and make sure that they have market share. What happens to innovation today? Is it put on pause or does it continue?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's sort of a complicated question because innovation usually takes place if you're talking about product development in product development centers, in laboratories, in facilities, and those facilities are closed right now. So unless it's something that can be done remotely, a lot of that is going to have been stalled. What's not been stalled is consumer research, consumer behavior research, because that is usually surveys, meetings, focus groups, and those types of activities can be done remotely, particularly surveys. I have students that run their own surveys. So that's not really a barrier to forwarding innovation.
Great. So you mentioned market research. So I want to dig a little deeper into that because you just said something very interesting. So what are market research or consumer insights projects focusing on right now? Are they innovating? Yes, the mechanics are in place and they're able to survey people right now because that is something you can do on the internet or via phone. But are they looking for the next watermelon Oreo? Are they looking to develop, or are they going back to basics? And if there is market research, are they testing messaging, or are they testing the usual new product development ideas?
A great question, because the time that we're in right now is not a normal time in terms of consumer behavior or product launches or test markets. It would be hard to run a test market right now and use those results as projectable. And that's one of the key things that we look for in a marketing research project is we found out something that these particular consumers seem to like, don't say, feel, don't feel. Can we expand that to a larger population? Which means, is it projectable? So when we do those kinds of tests, we try to find locations and timings that are projectable or easily replicatable in other places. If you test in an unusual place or an unusual time, the results are not going to necessarily be projectable. So you found out something about those people, but it's hard to say, therefore, everybody like these people are going to behave the same way, because there is something about that situation that can't be expanded. The thinking can't be expanded. Now, that creates some interesting challenges. And one of the challenges right now is to say, well, if we want to talk about consumer confidence, everybody in the country right now is kind of in the same boat. So if whoever we talk to about consumer confidence should be projectable, well, that's not necessarily true. That's not really true. If you're talking to consumers that happen to be in an area that's heavy manufacturing oriented, they're going to be of a different mindset than people that are in an area where it's more, let's say, financially oriented, where you don't need manufacturing to start up again. You don't need raw materials. You don't need people coming back into the factory. You just need a bunch of people in offices moving money around. So the dynamic is different. The products that we see right now that seem to be test marketed right now, I will bet we're probably already in the planning session and in the distribution pipeline already. For example, Oreo cookies, which is on the Bisco product, which is owned by Mondelez, has released a number of different new flavors. And you might think, why are they releasing those flavors now? Well, I don't know this for a fact, but I would tell you my strong suspicion would be they were planning that all along. They already had the inventory built up. The packaging was all done, and they're saying we want just sell it because the product has a shelf life, and we can't hold on to that product. What's going to be studied about this from marketers and marketing researchers is going to be how the public responded to the news, when the public responded to the news, how they responded to the shortages. And the big question now is how they're going to respond when the economy starts to pick up.
Great. I wanted to talk about one last thing, and that's profits. What happens to these manufacturers' profits when things are not the same? Now we have to spend on sanitizing and cleaning overnight or every 2 hours. Now we have to check people's temperatures at the door. Now we have to space people apart. Factories typically would like to maximize space and get people tight, close together. What happens to profits? Does that do these things affect profit, and to what extent?
Everything affects profits, and the biggest challenge to profits is going to be at the retail level. And what happens is products get sold, and as a product moves through the system and a product moves through its usable life, there's a distribution curve, there's a demand curve and a distribution curve, and there's a profit curve. And profits follow sales. They don't lead sales. And so there's a little gap between when sales are coming in and when profits are basically get recorded. And profits are very, very susceptible to changes in that curve. So what happens is you have a run on a product, and the product is at normal price. There's no price gouging. The stores blow out in a week. They sell everything in there. That's going to be a huge profit week. What happens in the next 2 or 3 weeks when there's nothing there? There's no profit coming in. Now you might say, well, as long as at the end of the month they've sold the same amount of product, isn't the profit going to be the same? Well, that's making a big assumption that they're actually going to sell the same amount of product. And most of the time, they're not. It's very unusual that an entire aisle, and let's say 3 shelves on 64 feet, that's a lot of profit in that week. And then there's going to be no profit till that gets totally replenished. So in that particular category, the non-profit period is going to overcome the run on the profit. Does that make sense on the product? Now you bring up the other issue, and that is the enhanced increased cost of additional servicing at the retail level. And what that means is, yes, the store has to, those retailers have to pay their people, and a lot of them are union workers, to clean and maintain, and sometimes spend all night, every night, taking care of that product. So their expenses are going up. Now, here's the thing about the consumer packaged goods industry that a lot of people don't actually realize, is that consumer packaged goods, from the retailer perspective, is a very low margin industry. You wouldn't believe that when you look at the prices, but that happens to be true. That's a nice way of saying food in the United States is relatively cheap. I know people are going to want to throw tomatoes at me when I say that. What do I mean by cheap? If you look at prices of food around the world, you will see that food here is basically a bargain. And that's because consumer packaged goods is very competitive. And as we know, competition suppresses prices. So we have an industry whose normal retail margins are about 2%. That's all the stores would make. So how do they stay in business? They stay in business because they are supported by the manufacturers. In other words, it's a supported industry. And so how does that happen? That happens by the promotions and the promotions that manufacturers run, that they pay the stores to run, and other activities that the stores charge the manufacturers to run. all we can say is we'll see what happens next.